You've seen it all, Randy, and you've been a part, as much as you have done your best as a journalist to stay out of the story, you certainly have been part of breaking some of the biggest stories in sports and, of course, in the DFW and in Texas. What's the biggest story you can remember breaking when you thought to yourself, wow, when this thing goes to print, or maybe it was talk radio, sports talk, when I go on the radio with this, it's really going to have a seismic impact?
It's funny. The seismic impact happened on radio. And that was when Jimmy Johnson called in. We were on WBAP. That's kind of the 50,000-watt blowtorch. The Cowboys were getting ready to play the 49ers in the playoffs. Huge game. Touted as the best game of the year, which was legitimate. And Jimmy calls in. I think he may have been jacked up on some Heineken and ice, but he calls in, and out of nowhere, our producer goes, "Hey, Jimmy Johnson's on the hotline." And I went, "Well, let's put him on." We've been talking about the game, and he goes, "Galloway, I want to tell you something. We're going to win this game. Put it in 3-inch headlines. We will win the game." And that, I hear it and I go, wow. My first thought was, we still had about an hour to go on the show. As soon as this show's over, I got to call the morning news beat guy. And I think it was Ed Werder, still a good friend. I got to call Ed and tell him what Jimmy said. Well, our producer, David Hatchett, was a little bit smarter than me. He got that tape and he sent it to AP right away. That thing was national in a second. And, of course, it blew up like crazy. And of course, they do win the game and everything else. So it was, but that's probably anything I've been involved in. That probably had, probably had the biggest impact.
How did you navigate that whole situation? I've read you for back when you were writing, and I can remember reading something, looking up this whole situation because I'm fascinated by it. You went on the record, hey, Jimmy made all the football decisions. There was really no question about that. Anybody who was there, like you were, Randy, knows that that's exactly what went on. How did you navigate that, holding a relationship with the two of them, but still covering, the biggest story in the country at the time, let alone Dallas?
I think honesty. I mean, you have to be. If Jerry had been involved in any of the decision making in football, then you give him credit. But he was not. And if the whole thing started, the breakup, and to this day, people still talk about the breakup, obviously, because the Cowboys have never been the same since. But Jerry started, and by the way, Jimmy is not totally innocent here. Jerry started asking Jimmy for, hey, give me a little, I want to do some football. I want to be involved in the football decisions. And like in the war room during draft time, the ESPN's now starting, you guys remember that? They started putting cameras in all the war rooms.
Yeah.
For, for your pick during the draft. And then you'd be on TV. And Jerry's asking things like, now this is according to Jimmy, and kind of confirmed by other people who were in there. Jerry's saying, hey, I want to be next to you, and we're kind of talking. How about that? Well, Jimmy just told him to go to hell. No, you got nothing to do with this. Well, that's what, and then it went on and on and on. That's what started everything that led to the breakup. If Jerry had just left it alone, Jimmy may be here today. Well, not really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
He would have been here as long as you wanted to. Now, he didn't, so Jimmy fired back, talked to Jacksonville about taking a job down there for a heck of a lot of money. That was just in defiance of Jerry. And then the famous blow-up came in Orlando at the owners' meeting that was in April. And a lot of alcohol involved on both sides. And that's when the firing really came down. The split came down. But there are people today say, well, Jimmy was here 5 years. And I heard this argument not a month ago from guys that should know better, guys who were there. They said, Jimmy didn't last anywhere over 5 years. And I go, wait a minute. Nothing Jimmy likes better than those championship rings. I am the champion. I said he named his boat after it in the Florida Keys, 3 rings. He named his restaurant in Miami, 3 rings. He named his dog 3 rings. I said, you think Jimmy wants to stop at 3 rings when he knows the talent there could win at least 2 more, maybe 3 more? Set an all-time record. Well, hell no, Jimmy didn't want to stop. But, I mean, his ego got in the way. Jerry's ego got in the way. Alcohol got in the way. And Jimmy was gone, and they did salvage one other Super Bowl out of Jimmy's players with Barry there, Barry Switzer. But that was it. That wasn't.
How about the story? And I've had an opportunity to talk with Quincy Carter a little bit. But you bailed him out of jail? Is that true?
Yeah. Yes. That is totally true.
Would you mind taking us inside that story?
That's a story. All right, it's Christmas. Pick up the papers. Getting ready to be Christmas, probably a week out. Pick up the papers that morning, and there's a story. Quincy Carter been arrested, possession of drugs. He's in jail, awaiting bail. And then we get to the station. I probably got in about 12:30. We started at 3. We were going to research this and that. Producer comes up and says, this is interesting. Nobody to bail. He doesn't have any money, I guess. And there's nobody that will bail Quincy Carter out of jail. And I went, well, that is interesting. So bail was $2,000. It cost $200 to bail him out. And so we're on the air. Now it's about 4, and Dodge, the producer, goes, Quincy's still in jail. He said, you know what? We ought to bail him out. I went, great idea. I said, hey, give him my, call somebody, find a bail bondsman around Irving or whatever. He jumps back on his mic in about 2 seconds, just a private mic into my earphones, and he goes, hey, how about this one, Cowboy bail bonds? I said, yeah, man. Okay, give him my credit card. Of course, I'm not thinking here. If he jumped bail, it's going to cost me $2,000. I'm thinking, well, I'll do it for $200. Sure enough, guy calls back and went, the owner called back. We were talking to somebody on the phone, and Dodge said, now the owner's on there. And he went, okay, we're going to do it. Tell Galloway we got his credit card. I went, okay. So they bailed him out, and he's out of jail. Now, what we were doing, you know what? We were making fun of Quincy Carter. And then the story became, we started talking about it on the air. Wait a minute, this guy despite being a total screw up, did win a divisional championship with the Cowboys. Did make the playoffs as the quarterback. He was with the team 3 years, 4, whatever. And there's nobody, not Jerry, not any of his ex-teammates, not any fans that will put up $200 to bail him out. And then it's like, man, that really ain't right. So actually, in the end, we started, after we had done it as a joke, in the end, we started feeling sorry for him.
Yeah.
Well, the owner calls back, the owner of Cowboy bails bond, and tells Galloway tells Dodge, tell Galloway we tore up his credit card. Dodge said, why? He said, we've got so much business with you guys talking about it. We want to thank you. And thank you for choosing Cowboy bail bond. So now here's the bottom line of the story. Radio station loved it. Oh boy. I think I'd moved to still working for Disney, which owned WBAP and of course ESPN. But the radio station, they loved it. They contacted Bristol. Bristol loved it. Oh, great. And the story had gone out everywhere. It was on the national wires. Sports writer radio sports talk host bailed out Quincy Carter. And God, I was getting phone calls from people going, what in the hell is going on now?
I remember thinking that.
But I'll tell you who wasn't. I was working for the Fort Star Telegram then. And I loved that place, and they'd given me a massive amount of money to move over there, this and that. But the same guy who'd hired me, the editor, he called me. He went, Randy, you've done something that you normally don't do. And I went, oh, God, what's that? He went, you made yourself the story. And he said, don't ever do that again. And I went, yeah, I believe you're right. I won't ever do that again.
And that's at the time you're, and you still are, but you're a titan of the industry. They paid a lot. I think it was like you know better than me, but it was reported $1.5 million for a contract.
Yeah, it was high dollar. And, it was. And these people were extremely nice to me. And I was at the Morning News 33 years. I never thought I'd leave. And then people say, did you do that for money? And they'll ask today, did you do that for money? And I go, hell yeah. Hey, it's always about the money. But I also did it because I knew most of the Star Telegram writers really liked them. Some of them were really friends of mine. I knew the kind of paper they were putting out, and to be in competition with the Morning News, I knew the kind of paper they wanted to put out. At the time, they were owned by Knight Ridder, and Knight Ridder was ready to go head-to-head with the Morning News basically about Tarrant County, because the Morning News would never invade Tarrant County, and certainly not Arlington, which was becoming like the 5th largest city in Texas. But now they were coming after Arlington. And so that inspired both Knight Ridder and the Star Telegram people, okay, let's go to war with them. And that's what was made about the move. But yeah, it's and of course they were right. I'm in radio talk show mode instead of being in, I guess, I never considered myself. I always said journalists are the guys covering that war.
Yeah.
Over in Iraq or Vietnam before or whatever. Those are journalists. I'm a sports writer. And who happens to be throwing around a lot of BS on the radio. But boy, you had to separate it. And I appreciate Dave Smith when I left the Morning News. Dave Smith was a sports editor. And somebody asked him, he had put him on the radio about me leaving, and somebody asked him, Well, are you glad Galloway left? Because his relationship with you, and mainly because he was breaking stuff on the radio that normally would have been in the paper and maybe should have been in the paper. And Dave went, no, Randy's too professional for that. I went, damn, that's not. That's not. I appreciate the heck out of that. But,
I want to ask you, if you were still writing your column today, okay, what is the piece that you would write about the state of the Dallas Cowboys right now?
The one piece I'd like to write involves the Dallas Mavericks, guys. I would. People have asked me about this, and there's been a lot of things that happened. I've been retired, 12 years. And there's a lot of things that happen with the Cowboys, and I'm thinking, boy, I'd like to have a column just to answer that or rip that or whatever. And the same way with the Rangers. And the Rangers win the World Series, man, I'd like to have a column maybe on that. But this Luka thing and the reaction of Nico, the general manager, and that doofus owner, whatever his name is.
The Dumas.
Yeah. Their reaction to all that. And it was a stupid trade. We all do stupid stuff. But when you combine arrogance with stupidity, boy, those are deadly sins. So it's, I went, heck, I'd like to be worked full time, just write every day on these idiots. But that would be the one thing. Yeah, the Cowboy deal. I don't understand Jerry, and I happen to like Jerry personally. I happen to like him. And people don't believe it, but he and I got along great. And in fact, speaking of the Sports Hall of Fame, I've got a letter Jerry sent me after I was inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame. Of course, a very nice letter. And but I've had a good relationship with him because I think that's the reason is he knew, and other people who were advising him knew that all my ripping of Jerry, and my God, it was a lot, as you guys know, but all my ripping of Jerry was not personal because I liked him. It was all about football. And I called him a football idiot many times. He's probably not an idiot, but, you have to be dramatic sometimes. But it was, Jerry, he didn't take it personal, nor was it meant to be personal. Because, as I've always said, whatever money I've got, if I could, I'd give it all to Jerry and just say invest it in whatever, because that guy's a money-making machine, as we all know. Just an absolute machine. Green machine, we can call it, because he can bring the green in, and still does. He's got a team that hadn't sniffed the NFC Finals, much less the Super Bowl, in over 25 years, and it's still one of the most valuable. Well, it is the most valuable NFL franchise. Now, go figure that.
Look, Randy, I can't thank you enough for the time. I got one more question for you.
No problem.
Yeah, who was your favorite athlete after a game? You go into the locker room. Who was your favorite athlete to get a quote from and to talk to? And not someone, I know that you're going to answer this the right way, but just so people know, to give a context, not someone, okay, I need a quote. The Cowboys just got blew out. Who's going to talk to me? Yeah. Who was your favorite guy to talk to that was deep, maybe a tough guy to access, but when you got him, they were amazing?
Well, it's people have asked me this over the years. I think it's a valid question when you do it for 50 years in the same market. Well, 49 in this market, 1 year in Port Arthur. But to start my so-called career. And there were many arrangers. When you're a beat man for 10 years, you get to know those guys. And there were many arrangers involved. There's been some Mavericks involved. A few Dallas Stars. I didn't know a damn thing about hockey, and I declared myself a hockey expert in 2 weeks. Yeah, I now know everything, but I loved some of I love some of those hockey players. But I'll have to say this: my favorite go-to guy was, and a lot of people don't want to believe this, but it was Michael Irvin. I've never seen a better quote, and a guy who could sum it up better than Michael, and do it honestly. Now, and also with Michael, I mean, you can't find a better locker room guy, a better teammate guy, a better all around. That's a guy I want on my team guy. I mean, you won't ever find that. Despite in all that, he's got Hall of Fame credentials. Not just credentials, he's in the Hall of Fame, NFL Hall of Fame. But now one thing about Michael, you get him out of that locker room, put him on the street, and God knows what may happen, as we all know. We all know the Michael stories, and unfortunately, some of them are still happening when he's nearly 60 years old. But I got to answer. I always answer that with Michael Irvin, because when the Cowboys don't draft Randy Moss. I can't even remember who it was. They got a decent player, but they didn't draft Randy Moss. And of course, it turned out to be a massive, massive mistake. But the first training camp was in Wichita Falls, Midwestern State. There on the campus. The first training camp after they didn't draft him in April was up there, about 3 months later, I guess. So I'm walking. I'd been out to practice. I'm walking back to the press room, which was next to the gym, which had become a locker room and all that. And here's somebody hollering at me. Turn around, it's Michael. He's walking back. And he comes up beside me and he went, "Hey, don't blame Jerry for Randy Moss, no matter what happens." And he said, "I think Randy Moss is just going to be a great, great player, great, great receiver. But don't blame Jerry." I said, "Well, who do I blame then? Because Jerry claims he's in charge of the draft." He said, "Blame me." He said, "Because of all my escapades." That was when he came to court. You remember that?
Yeah, sure.
He had been in court in the fur coat and the famous line to the Irving police officers who had knocked at the door. He opened it and they went, "You're under arrest." And his line was, "Do you know who I am?" And the cop went, "Yeah, we know who you are." Put your hands behind your back and all that. So this was the draft after that. He said, because of me, the Cowboys could not take Moss, because, Moss had a reputation.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And being a guy that was going to cause trouble.
There's a reason why he fell to the Cowboys.
Going to be off. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
He was going to be off the field problems. And so, that's just an example. But Michael, I said, "Hey, I'm going to write this." And he went, "Write it." I went, "Okay." So I wrote it. Boy, that column attracted a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But Michael just wanted to get that out there. Blame me, he said. So those are all, one other thing. You guys probably got to go, but
no, give me one more.
After Troy Aikman, look, Jimmy did not like Troy Aikman. I believe that to this day. Jimmy will deny it to this day. And Jimmy and I had a big feud going over Aikman. And I'd gotten to know Aikman pretty well the first 2 years he was here. Then they make their playoff run in, what was that, 91.
Yeah.
And they're going into Detroit. Well, Steve Berline, who was just one of the great people of all time, had Aikman got hurt. Berline had started 5 games. They won them all. He was playing great, and he was a great guy. Jimmy makes a decision with Troy healthy. Well, we're starting Berline again. I didn't necessarily disagree with him. I kind of thought, yeah, he's got to do that. And Berline was awful. Lions are blowing him out. He puts Troy in and mop up. And so game's over. I'm in the locker room. I'm not even going to talk to Troy. I'm wandering around talking to this guy and that guy. I see him motion me to come over there. Wasn't anybody else around. Some people had been talking to me, but nobody else was around. And he went, hey, I'm going to demand a trade in the morning. I went, really? He went, yeah, I'm going to Jerry and say, you trade me. I'm not playing for Jimmy Johnson ever again. I said, well, Troy, I'm writing that. He went, write it. Then we talked a little more. He said, Jimmy doesn't want me here. I don't want to be here, blah, blah, blah. And I get up to walk away. I said, all right, thanks. And he came back, called me back over and went, hey, don't write that in the morning. I said, Aikman, you're killing me. That's a hell of a story. He said, I tell you what I'll do. I will call you at exactly noon because we didn't have sales. And he said, I'll call you at exactly noon. Are you going to be in the office or home? I said, in the office. I said, all right. So I get back to the office. I tell the boss, and the editor's there. I said, hey, big story coming. Should have had it this morning, but Aikman called me off, and nothing I could do. And, of course, I got second guess. Well, you could have hinted at it. I said, no, you don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't hint at nothing. Well, the phone rings. Sure enough, it's probably about 10 to 12. Right before I said, oh, man, here's Aikman. Sure enough, he went, hey, you won't believe what happened. I went, what the hell happened? He said, I get in about 10:30. I get in the locker room. I'm packing up everything. Season's over.
Because the game was in Detroit, for people that don't know. Is that
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, of course, they had flown back after the game. And he said, suddenly I get one of the secretaries came down and said, hey, Jimmy wants to see you. And I'm going, yeah, well, okay. No, she said, no, really. So he goes down to Jimmy's office, walks in. Jimmy said, Troy, sit down. Just want to tell you one thing. You are my starting quarterback. Right now, you are the franchise quarterback. You tell me exactly what you need, who you want as offensive coordinator, blah, blah, blah. It's all yours. You're in total control of the offense on this team. Aikman went, I couldn't believe it. I said, I find that hard to believe, too. He said, well, I'm staying. And so I go, that's history. Because if Aikman had left, what was going to happen? Would they have won those 3 Super Bowls?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. And that's kind of a historic type deal right there.
Yeah.
But, yeah, he was the early evening before in Detroit, Michigan. He was gone. And then suddenly he wasn't. So whatever Jimmy and Jimmy said, oh, well, I was talking to Jimmy about it that day. And I happened to kind of get him alone. And I said, well, here's what Troy told me. I said, did you know that? And he said, no, I didn't know it. I don't know whether he did or not. But he said, you know what? I was planning on doing this all along.
Uh-huh.
And that's kind of Jimmy. I know that may have been BS, but I was planning on doing this all along, which is kind of a Jimmy thing to say. That's why I like him. You never know, boy, what he might come up with.
Well, honestly, Randy, conversations like this are why I love you, and being able to be on the other end of one for the first time is really cool. And you're a legend, and you belong in the Texas Sports Hall of Fame. And we'll take whatever we can get from you, content-wise.
All right. I enjoyed it too, guys. And when I retired, I said I'm staying off the radio. I'm staying out of the newspapers. And I still do it. If friends of mine have a show like Ian Fitzsimmons, who's on for me, he's on ESPN at night, the national ESPN, and some other guys. But I try to do some of them, and I really enjoyed this one. It's very good. And, you have, things happen to you in your career, particularly if you stay that long. And, the greatest thing that happens to you in life, my two daughters were born, grew up to be very successful people. And then I had 4 grandkids born, and those are and the way they've turned out. Heck, the youngest is now a freshman in college. But, and the way they've turned out, that's been a great thing. So those are the highlights of your life. But professionally, the highlight was the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, obviously, because there can be no bigger highlight. So I was surprised, but to be notified. But people asked, "Do you think you deserve this?" I had somebody ask that. I thought a long time, and I answered, "I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm damn sure going to accept it." So at the induction ceremony, I went, "I accept." Jay Black, you can't take it back. I accept.
Well, Randy, man, thank you so much.
Guys, I've enjoyed it. All right, I did enjoy it. Best of all, to you guys.
Thanks so much, Randy Galloway.